What's up everyone? Today we're gonna be doing something a bit different. This is basically a list of tricks that Avengers can pull off under Steve, right? We're gonna be using Steve Rogers' leadership for this, right? So the first superpower used by each allied character by each turn is reduced by 1 to a minimum of 1. So this is just to showcase a few of the really nasty things you can do with Avengers when playing them competitively. These are all models that I use in my list. Put this on, right? And I've just put, like, there's more than 20 threads of model on the table. It's purely just for showing everything in one go, potentially. All right. The first thing to know is that if you deploy Hulk in between two objectives, two extracts on the C line, right? Like for instance, the Legacy Cures is one of the more classic example, as it is a extract that I use normally in Avengers, and I really recommend people use it. So what's interesting with Hulk is if you have priority, you can just choose one and grab it. If you don't have priority, you can set up in between two and grab whichever one they don't go for. Like, so here we're going to pretend, I'm just going to show that he does reach both, right? So first thing you always want to do, once the deployment lines have been turned off, is to use Gamma Leap first. Because with Gamma Leap, first you get to use your placement, and because you can only have one of each tool on the table, this way you can get your place one and your small tool out, well, short tool out at the same time, so that you can position yourself properly. See, and in this instance, Gamma Leap would cost 3, reduced by 1 because of Steve. And you can use the last power to grab the Legacy Cure. Then you still have an action life, which means that you can reposition Hulk to not stay on the center line. Now, why you don't want to stay on the center line is because as a first activation in a round, you want to grab the extracts to get more extracts than your opponent, but you don't want to do this and stay exposed, right? Because if you stay exposed, it's easy to punish the center line, generally speaking. And we deploy Hulk roughly in between both, right? He was like around here. And as you can see, I had like a lot of room to reach on the other side. So for instance, if I were to go here, I could easily reach this one, right? Even if I were to place myself back here, right? Just to show properly that it reaches both ways, right? As you can see, super easy. So this is a good one to know, because on any C-shape extract, you can use this with Hulk so that even if you don't have priority, you can go and grab whichever one you want is left, right? Even if they were to grab one, you could go for the other one and then retreat. So this is the first thing we want to look at, right? So let's say we're just gonna pretend we went for this one for just like the sake of showing everything else after, right? But on the side ones, on say Infinity Formula, what is nice that you get to reposition yourself back onto the console, like say here for instance. And then let's say your opponent went and grabbed the middle one. I'm just gonna pretend that they grab both. Because I want to show two different, we're gonna look at 3 different punishes on the center line. We're gonna get 4, I guess, but let's pretend that they send those 2 models to pick up these, right? So if they were to do this at some point during the game, if you have models like Sabertooth, Apex Predator, Black Cat, Sam, you can do a lot of interesting punishes. So the most standard one is the Black Cat play, which I will show right now. So everyone's familiar with Black Cat. Well, maybe not everyone, but Master Cat Burglar is a 3-cost superpower which lets you steal a asset or civilian token from your opponent, as long as you're not already holding more than you're allowed to from the crisis. That costs 3, which is reduced to 2 with Steve's leadership. So if you combine this with Advanced R&D, which lets you transfer power from a model to from another model, right? You can spend power and give up to 1 to 5 different models. Yeah, so like this lets you open up a really nasty play. The default one that people will be familiar with is just, you know, double moving Black Cat, going for the steal. But if you play Sam, who has access to Airlift, you can use Airlift. Airlift is probably it's like one of those superpowers that people forget Sam has, but it's like, especially under Steve, it enables so many things with the place 2. First of all, it lets you, it has to be a size 2 or less character, by the way, so you cannot do this on anyone. Be careful. The first few times I used it when Sam came out, I didn't realize that. So what you would want to do with Sam, for instance, is move using airlift on Black Cat, which would let Black Cat place, right? This does cost a power on Sam. The standard sequencing that I do when someone is on the center line, right? Like for instance, one of these models is to move Sam with airlift, move Black Cat. I'm gonna place her towards where the other player is, this way. Look at that. You will now be able to move, get within one of the model in the midline, and then move back. So that way we can steal an objective from someone, in this case Sam, right? At some point, not right away. But with Sam, what I would normally do is once I move there, I would shoot a shield into someone, generating a power no matter what happens, because it is a gainer, so guaranteed power. I advance R&D that power to Black Cat, so that way I am right away ready for the play, right? Which is to get within one, steal, and then, you know, be extremely happy with life. One thing to note, try to re-angle her roughly where she was. Same thing, if she plays between two spots, right? I'm gonna respawn the tokens to be certain that Sam is properly placed. It's a little too far back. So see, if Black Cat is placed over here, roughly in between both objectives, right? Like, I say roughly because like you have to eyeball it, but see like 11.7 inches and 11.6. Try to be roughly in the center. You should be able to reach both sides. If I remember correctly, right, as you can see, I can easily reach this side. I could easily get to the other one. So that way you also, once again, threaten two different objectives with Black Cat. The same way that Hulk was potentially able to grab these two, with Black Cat on the other side, you cover those two too. So no matter what your opponent does, you're going to be able to grab something safely with Hulk, and you're likely to be able to steal something with Black Cat, who with Sam Wilson's help, will be able to do it safely. Why is it important to do everything safely? It's amongst other reasons because of stuff like Black Cat. There's other punishes, right? With advanced R&D. Another one that I really like in Avengers is with Sabertooth. There's quite a few different ways, right? But basically, generate an extra power, use or one of the powers you just have available. I often just, if I don't have anything more exciting, I will often just move Steve somewhere on an objective and give away round 1 power to someone like, say, Sabertooth in this case. And then what Sabertooth can do with an extra power is basically be a living bullet and just throw himself into someone with Primal Pounce. You can move Primal Pounce, which normally costs 3 but is reduced by 1 under Steve. In a collision, Sabertooth is size 3, so we are talking about a 4 damage collision. Most models, when they go and grab an extract and stay on the center line, don't have power for breaks for impact on round 1. So that means that they are normally taking a 4 damage collision, take a bunch of damage, and then you strike them because you have an action left, right? With a 5 dice pierce attack, which may or may not do something. Don't expect it to do anything, but you start generating offense. And it is a pretty big attrition swing, because if Sabertooth deals 1 damage in between both attacks, next round, with your power up, you're back at 2 power to it, and that is another Primal Pounce coming in. If you've dealt a bit more, you can look at Stop Squealing and Die. You just set yourself up for some nasty plays. The other, right, so this is another one of the classic plays that I look at these days with Avengers. So we've got the Sabertooth Primal Pounce spray, which is a way of punishing someone on the center. We have the Black Cat Steel play, right, with Sam Airlift. If your opponent isn't on the midline, you don't necessarily need to do the airlift play, but if they are, it is extremely brutal. You could move over here, spend your 2 power from R&D, and steal. You cannot necessarily do both of these in the same game, because then you need someone to have generated an extra power, which can be possible sometimes, right? You can, if you know you're going for both, plan accordingly. Then you would steal this one and retreat. So assuming we're living in this magical Christmas land, right? The other one I wanted to look at is Pyro. Under Steve is extremely strong because he lets you play a positional game that is really rough to play around over time. For instance, right, if they had models set up like over here, and then this guy over here, with Pyro, Deployed mostly centrally, right? I can easily double move, identify whichever model is an issue, and firewall them on the first round. Right? I could move, get within 3 of Black Bolt or Crystal, for instance, on this side. With where I was deployed, I would not necessarily reach that side, but I could reach most people on the center line, right? Even Sam, who looks kind of far, right? I was deployed, but if you're deployed roughly centrally, anyone that's on the mid line is pretty much free game. Can easily get in range of almost anyone on this mid line, even if, as long as you're deployed roughly in the center. Just to give you an idea in terms of inches, right? I was like somewhere around here, fucking 18 inches, right? So you can be pretty far away from someone and still double move and reach them. And then just apply firewall. Firewall slows and roots someone. So what that does is mostly that for round 2, it sets you up for some really nasty options. Because if I slow and root you, for instance, over here, then next round just run away with my models, your assault model is gonna have a hard time catching up. You can combine, of course, Pyro is also really good to combine with Hulk, for instance, because if you slow and root someone and then throw them medium with Hulk, which can happen in certain scenarios with Strongest One there is, or Sabertooth. Sabertooth also throws medium with Cat Front, which he can do on the first round through a advanced R&D. So if you were to do one of those type of models, you could, for instance, slow root someone and then throw them medium, and then a model that's been thrown medium really doesn't like being thrown. I'm just gonna reset the board a little bit. We're gonna look at the Hulk punish. Because sometimes there's not that many extracts on the field, depending on the scenario, right? So maybe you're playing on like Montesi or Researcher or something, and you just need Hulk to go and beat faces. So we're gonna... Alright, let's assume you just want to go and beat up Medusa. What I recommend is always start with Gamma Leap whenever you want to do something, if you need to use it for the movement, right? Because one rule that is important, you can never have more than one of each tool on the table. Right, this is really important. Please try to remember it. I see a lot of people do this the wrong way, and it's always a bit annoying, right? Because if I were here already and wanted to Gamma Leap to get within one of the Legacy Cure, I could not place within one while Gamma Leaping because I need my widget on the field for the Gamma Leap. You have to eyeball it, right? You can look at it and be like, oh, it lands like here, but you might mess up. So always Gamma Leap first. So with Gamma Leap costing 2, one thing you can do, it's not my favorite play, sometimes it's the right play, is you can use Avengers Assemble for 1 power. And that way, in between Gamma Leap and Avengers Assemble, you can get Hulk within 2 of someone that went on the mid line, so that means that you would also be on the center. We're gonna put a different secure just to show. Hey, magic! Now it's demons. But normally, if you're within 2 of someone, you are also... Oops, I don't know what's going on with TTS. But if you're at max 1, from an objective, your opponent is also at max 1, you will be within 2. That means that you can spawn Hulk to contest the mid line, beat up someone that is on the mid line, if they had, say, grabbed the objective. But what's interesting is now I have 2 actions left with Hulk, so I can strike twice, which is potentially a lot of damage because it's 2/7 dice strike with a push on a wild. So if it's like Gamma Wave and they've sent a bunch of models in the center, you can always just like strike more than one person, maybe push him off, push her off, and then throw her, right? Because once you've generated power, you can use Strongest One there is. This one is less, I use it less often, but it's still a good one to know in your back pocket. And the last one we're going to look at is not a Avengers specific combo, but Fallback plus mission objective is a really neat interaction that when you play Avengers will come up more often than you'd expect, just because it is 2 cards that I highly recommend you try to play often, as when you're trying to dominate extracts with stuff like Black Cat, Hulk doing the safe extract plays and all that, you often want to try to hold on to those objectives to maintain your scenario advantage. But what will happen at some point is one of your models, let's say Black Cat stole one of these, took some damage, and she's like over here and your Hulk is like, say, over there. So they're not within 2 of each other. But when your Black Cat takes an attack again, as long as she's got 2 power before the attack resolves, and will have 2 power after. So it costs 4 power total, but 2 of them have to be before damage is dealt. for fallback, you can use fallback before the damage, because you can fall back within 2 of your teammate. Let's take Hulk, for instance, here, right? I could fall back over here. And say the attack dealt 3 damage. I would take 1, 2, 3. I spent 2 for the fallback, and then I would take 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And as I've taken that damage and gained that power, I can now use mission objective to hand off the extract to Hulk, which means that Hulk will now be holding the extract. Sure, I've used 2 cards, but I've maintained my extract. So if Hulk already has another one, for instance, I'm maintaining that extract advantage on my opponent, right? Because I have only 1 and I've got 2. Right? 2 on Hulk, 2, 1 to my opponent, so I would still be in the lead scenario-wise on the extracts because of that card combination. Which when you have models that are stealing stuff that are kind of frail like Black Cat, this card combo becomes really strong, so that once you've stolen something, you get to give it to someone else, even if you've been moved, beaten up. Of course, if you're already within 2, you can just mission objective, but if you're not already within 2, it's a great little tool to get back in range and give the extract to someone else, ideally one of your tankier models like a Hulk or Steve, especially injured Steve, but as long as you keep your extract, everything can be fine. This roster, right, so I've shown you the airlift combo with Black Cat. You also have other fun interactions, just beating up stuff or doing the safe extract play, the primal pawns plan, firewall. Oh, a last one with Black Cat that can be interesting, right? If you've gotten to 2 power with advanced R&D and are still on the midline, like let's just respawn the tokens, right? The airliftlets are still on someone, but something else you can do, because sometimes your opponent will not want to let you steal them, so they will just not move to grab the objective. So one thing you can do is use advanced R&D again, give a power to Black Cat off of someone, doesn't really matter who, but with 2 power, what you can always do as an alternative if you've got no one to steal, just use 1 power for grappling hook, right, instead of 2, get within 1 an objective, grab it and run away. Why run away? For the same reason that you always want to do this, I think, if possible. Gives you that little positional advantage, and it means that your model stays, right? Because if I'm here, my opponents will not have really dangerous threat. Probably do another video more about like why it's important to be mindful of going on the midline too fast. But as a rule of thumb, don't go on the center line too early in the game, because you're just asking to get attacked by a lot of stuff and lose your model too fast. Doesn't mean to not go on it, but make sure you go on it later in the round than early on. The other models like can do like fun stuff, like of course Spider-Woman with I Don't Fly, I Glide can do the same thing as Black Cat, right, with grappling hook, where if you advance R&D power, she can move, she can I Don't Fly, I Glide, move, grab something, move back, or like just stay on the center and attack. Dr. Voodoo just does voodoo stuff. I'm probably gonna have him featured in different videos over time and just talk about him in these when I'm in the gameplay reviews. Same thing with Luke. I don't think there's anything super fancy. Same with Miss Marvel. One thing to note, with Advanced R&D, you can begin on the first round, which can sometimes be useful, especially if you also airlifter. Let's just show with some shenanigans pretender that our opponent went on the midline with her Sam to grab this extract, and say you have Miss Marvel and Sam on the field. You could do something similar, right? With Sam, you could do the move airlift play, so you would move, spending a power for airlifting Miss Marvel, then shoot your shield ideally into someone, like the one person on the midline that's nearby, gain a power. We don't really care about the dice results, so no point rolling anything, but give that power away to Miss Marvel. And now if you look at Miss Marvel, she's not in range for a throw, but she's in range for an attack. So you could potentially do morpho punches into to try to get the wild trigger and push them towards you, and then throw them, maybe like with take out the trash, to get them really close on your side, right? You could potentially move them short twice towards you, But more often than not, when you're doing that play, it's because you want to date someone. Which, if you're, one thing to know with Miss Marvel, if you're within 4 of someone, you're always in range of beating them up once you're big, right? If you're within 4, you're guaranteed to be within 3 with the attack. And what's interesting is once you're done attacking with Embiggen, you retransform, right? And once you retransform, I'm gonna use Sam as an example. You're gonna you can move forward and look at that. You're now on the center line. So if there is an objective on the middle, you could be sitting on it after having attacked twice without using Avengers Assemble. You've just used Advanced R&D. Well, just a pretty good big card. And in the case of Miss Marvel, we're looking at 5 dice strikes with 2 rerolls from morphogenetics more often than not, and an extra reroll for being inhuman. So that is a lot of damage, and it's a move that a lot of people don't expect. Like, very few people expect that play. And it's a really, really nasty one, which I highly recommend you guys to try out in the future. And it's one of the reasons I like Miss Marvel in the list. And just like for the sake of showing how big of a move this is almost a medium move. Like transforming, using Embiggen to transform, and then the transform forward is giving you roughly a medium move worth of distance. Like, it's pretty crazy how much movement you can get off of this, right? You can be on a back point, and now you're suddenly on the center, and it does mean that you tread pretty far. Keep this in mind, Miss Marvel is amazing, and she is also able to punish people really well with airlift. Other models that do this really well is anyone that moves medium and has a charge will be able to reach the center line with airlift. Thor is not currently in my list, but I've used him in the past. He feels pretty decent under Steve. One thing that's fun with him with airlift, or you can do this with Wolverine also. You just need R&D to give him an extra power for the best at what I do, which is his fancy charge. Right, Thor gain starts at 2 power, Sam at 1. What's fun is with Thor you don't need advanced R&D. Basically, if you airlift someone, you can easily move and get on the midline. So if they have a charge, like for instance Thor with 4 Asgard, you could spend power for 4 Asgard and attack someone that's been sitting on the center. And you're on the center, you can strike them with a range 2 strike. You'd get 2 strike twice with Thor. Maybe get, lucky, those wild throws and mess your opponent up. But yeah, airlift is really, really good. There's quite a few ways to exploit it, right? You can do stuff with Miss Marvel, for instance. A model like Black Cat for the steal is, of course, like probably the most broken thing you can do, but sometimes you need the damage and you go for like a Miss Marvel or Thor, or in my case that's mostly Miss Marvel, right? Sometimes Spider-Woman, I guess. I could do Spider-Woman in my list also, just to showcase, right? With Spider-Woman, one thing that you can do with airlift is use airlift, right, with Sam. Fun thing, once again, you don't need anything else. You can then just use I don't fly, I glide, which costs 2 but is reduced to 1. So with your first power on the first round, you get to do it. You can move. You will not be on the midline. Okay, this is important. She has a range 3 attack, so she will still be in range to attack anyone standing on the center. This is really relevant when facing models with martial artists, because martial artists, the opponent has to be within 2 to gain the count blanks defense. So if you're attacking, say, a Mystique who has martial artists and stealth, you will be in that sweet spot where you are not within 2, but you are within 3. That's just useful info, right? Like that she can do that off of a airlift plus I don't fly, glide. So basically, as you can see, airlift enables a lot of stuff, and it's really, really good. The other thing that's interesting with Sam, let's just go back to Infinity Formula, for instance. If your opponent is not careful, let's say they send, pretend nothing else exists for a moment. All that matters is Sam. And let's say our opponent sent someone on their objective, and so they went, doesn't matter, let's say over here. So they go over here because they're like, aha, this way Sam will not be able to push me away. But with Sam and him having charge, another thing you can do, I don't recommend doing this too often, but it can be pretty good. Sometimes it's the play. You can move, and then you can charge, and you go really far. You will not reach a back objective on a D map with this normally. Every time I've tried, I've never made it. Supposedly it's possible. I don't think so. So you can double move, get on a canister, on a back objective, but on that second move, you do a charge, which means that you're now shooting, say, Crystal, and if you deal damage, you push her away. You would push her, like in this case, towards your team, right? Because most of my team will be on this side, and she's no longer on an objective. So if it was the only model on that objective, I am now scoring that objective. Even if I fail to push her, I'm now contesting it. So like for the scenario plays, it can be really good, and it can also set you up for sometimes some free kills with other models, right? Like if I have a Oak that's waiting over here, I might be able to do some extra juicy stuff. Even if Oak has moved, right, and is standing over here, he's going to be extremely happy to beat up Crystal next round. And with Sam's charge, it reaches really pretty much anywhere on the map. Or almost, like if you're like in the center or so, you can pretty much reach, like, because double long move plus, like, I don't know if you reach necessarily their objective from the center. Yes, you do. Pretty brutal, but like you can shoot people that haven't even moved yet, which I've done in the past, like against a Rocket Raccoon or another model that's like pretty fragile, especially with low physical defense. Can be pretty funny. You just charge, shoot them before they moved, and then if you deal damage, you push them. It's pretty brutal. Less common that I do this, but it's just another tool in your assortment of weapons. And if you're playing that 32 threat squad, you've got a lot of options. But basically, yeah, Sam under Steve is like best model. There's no one else that does what Sam does under Steve overall for 3 threat. So just always play him, or almost, and keep in mind all the airlift shenanigans you can do, and or charge, and you're gonna have a good time. So that's it. Play more Sam under Steve and have fun. Thanks for watching.